These next three speakers are talking on a very important topic. It's community highs, how cannabis companies improve lives and local economies. Here, speaking, is Eastern Michigan University legend, Detroit Lion quarterback, Pittsburgh Steeler quarterback, and two-time Super Bowl champion, Senior Vice President of CapStone Holdings. Please welcome to the stage, Charlie Batch. Joining Charlie on the owner of The Eighth, a man who has committed his life to transforming his community. Please welcome to the stage, Wershe Jr., better known as White Boy Rick. And moderating today's panel is a man you know and love. Please welcome Benzinga's own Javier Hasse. This is Community Highs, how cannabis companies improve lives and local economies. Gentlemen, take it away.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the Benzinga Cannabis Capital Conference. As you know, we like to switch it up, mix all different angles. So this conversation is completely unscripted and will be very real. So I don't know, get ready. Charlie, Rick, thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Doing well, thank you.
Let's start with your stories a little bit. I think, both of you have incredibly interesting stories and, life stories, and then how you get into cannabis. Rick, you want to go first?
I'll go first.
Yeah, it's documentary worthy, so listen up.
I was incarcerated most of my adult life. Towards the end of my incarceration, I started reading a lot about cannabis, the good things that it does, the opioid epidemic in America, and how cannabis could, actually help a lot with that. So I got super interested in cannabis. When I got out, I was approached. I had some lifelong friends that were in cannabis, one of them that was incarcerated with me as a juvenile. So I talked to them a lot, and I saw the good things that we all could do in the cannabis community. So it kind of pushed me towards that. I give back to the community a lot through cannabis. And without the cannabis industry, the things that I do in the community, I wouldn't be able to do on the level that I do them. You would be able to give back some, but it's much easier to pick up the phone and call my friends to raise the money for a $90,000 van than, go to regular business owners and ask for that type of money.
I think it's beautiful to put the money that we make in cannabis to good work. We were just talking about another very good representative of Detroit, Trick, who also is in the cannabis business and is doing something similar, right?
Absolutely.
Like leveraging the resources that this beautiful industry gives us to give back to the communities that we love. Why do you love cannabis? Now I'll get to you in a second. Just bear with me. But what you said, I became very interested in cannabis. What was it that drove that interest? Of course, beyond the fact that it's
I
awesome,
had a young
right?
man, he was paralyzed. I think at the age of 17, he started writing to me in prison, and we started, talking about cannabis, and he wasn't afforded through his insurance to get cannabis, and he couldn't afford it. So through some of my friends while I was still incarcerated, I was able to give him cannabis for free. And when I got out, it was actually the first stop I made on my way home was to visit this young man. And he showed me the pills that they give him. He told me the effects that they have on him, that some of the things constipate him. Some of them do this. Cannabis relaxed him, made him feel better. He was able to function better. So for that, it's kind of a driving force behind me. And a lot of my friends, to be honest, that are in this industry, we came up in the streets. So I look at it like the better we do for society through this industry, the stupider they look for locking us up. So.
Amen. Charlie, a little bit about your story, life story and how you get into cannabis.
Yeah, so I'm born and raised in Pittsburgh and had the opportunity to play at Eastern Michigan. From there, I was drafted by the Detroit Lions in 1998, played 4 years there, and then ultimately went to Pittsburgh in 2002. Played 11 seasons there, and then ultimately was part of 3 Super Bowl championships, and we won 2 of them. You see one ring that we have here. But it's pretty cool to be a part of a Super Bowl championship team. But I wore multiple hats, and I was actually I was a player rep for the NFL Players Association for our team. Ultimately expanded that role, became the vice president of the union. And one of the issues that we actually were talking about was opioids and how you're dealing with pain management. Because if you're dealing with a professional team, they continue to just pump out pain medication. It's just Toradol shots after Toradol shots, whatever that looks like. Eventually, you get addicted to pain. So as I kind of transitioned throughout toward the end of my career, pain was an issue. And of course, when you're watching a football game, there's a 100% chance that a player will be injured in that football game that you're watching. And you'd be surprised on the pain medications that they give afterward. But ultimately, for me, as I transitioned away, I was taking 6 to 8 of these a day, not necessarily 1 to 2 that they recommend. And at that point, my wife was like, I'm nervous. And I don't think if at this pace right now, you're not gonna have a kidney or a liver in the next 10 years. So I didn't do it when I played, only because it still was against the collective bargaining agreement. I never wanted to be that person suspended 4 games for taking weed. Like, come on. But ultimately, learning and educating myself after I finished, my wife was the one that actually went out to California, educated herself, spent about a week out there, and came back and said, you wanna know what? I want you to try these particular products. Because I was having issues walking, sleeping, and it was just irritable. And ultimately, when I started that transition, it was like, wow, I started seeing my body kind of react in different ways that it never reacted before. Ultimately started to kind of get on a regimen, and now here I am all these years later. I walk 30 to 35 miles a week, something that I could not do prior to that happening. So it's just more or less educating. And that from once I educated myself, then that's when I became involved with CapStone Holdings. And our chairman, Keith Stone, was like, hey, he wants to invest in the cannabis space. He invested over $80 million into the particular space and needed someone to kind of head that. And he asked me to be a part of it, and then have any opportunity to meet many great folks in the room at many different conferences. It's just one of those things that give me a chance to really just talk about why I got involved, but ultimately how can we help others continue to move in this particular space.
I've probably spoken to, I don't know, like 50 or 60 former NFL players, and most of their stories, right, always about cannabis. I remember doing a cover story for Playboy for the Super Bowl weekend a few years ago. Even Joe Montana was in it, right? And these people are, you know, the stories are always the same. Like, they're horror stories, and you know, I got injured, and my coach wanted me back like as soon as possible, so they pumped me full of pills. And you know, we know now that cannabis is an alternative. It's the gateway drug is a myth, and cannabis is many times an exit drug.
And you can see a lot of professional organizations now, they're getting away from that. You know, when you look just recently in big news, just a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, the NBA and their new collective bargaining, they don't even test for it anymore. The NFL is the only one of the last organizations that still tests for it, even though they know that they're pushing out opioids. But now it's a matter of how can they counter that. And I think at some point you'll see a change. But unfortunately, in the NFL collective bargaining agreement, the next negotiations don't occur until 2030. So you're still going to see this particular trend, and it's still going to be a problem for the National Football League.
I want to hear a little bit more about your businesses, understand what you're doing, and then we'll get into how you're giving back. But Rick, tell us a little bit about the 8th. How does it come to be? You know, you share a little bit about that, but what are you doing, and why is it special, right? You know, there's a bunch of cannabis brands out there.
First, it's special to me because the 8th, a lot of people think it's 8th of weed. It's your 8th Amendment, which bans cruel and unusual punishment, excessive fine, excessive bail. So it's our constitutional law that says you can't give we were the only country in the world. We say we're the most humane country, but we were the only country in the world that gave juveniles life for anything other than murder. So I was 17 years old. My friend sitting here, Kevin, was 16 years old. They actually gave us life without parole as kids for a drug crime. So Kevin was a little more fortunate than me. He did about half the time, and when I say fortunate, I think he did about 16 years. He was able to come home, be successful, have a family. 33 years, it's a little longer. So for me, things have been a little more challenging, but it is what it is. I have a good team. I have, you know, people sitting here that support me. They're like my brothers, my family, my partners. So the team that is around me, when I have a struggle, they're there. So it's not easy, but I get through it. You know what I mean? And the brand for me, we give back to overly incarcerated, because if you're overly incarcerated, you're wrongfully incarcerated. So a kid from the suburbs gets 2 years, a kid from the ghetto gets 10 years. That's not the way our laws are written, that they're supposed to work. Unfortunately, in our society, that's the way that it still works. So we try and give back, to the community, to people that are, overly incarcerated or wrongfully incarcerated. And that's what the 8th is all about. It's a brand with a mission. Our mission is to bring fairness to the justice system. So I don't know if we'll do it in my lifetime, but we're gonna keep pushing that agenda and, try and help as many kids as we can. I'm fortunate, I was telling Charlie earlier, Run DMC growing up was like my childhood icons or heroes. And Daryl McDaniels, who's DMC, D is big into kids, and I work with this company, Team Wellness, and they just gave us half of the kids out of the juvenile detention center. They were locked up, and these kids were 11, 12, 13 years old. They're locked down 23 hours a day, some of them with no bathroom in their room. Mentally, that was done to me as a child. I'm 53 years old. I still remember being locked in a cell as a 12 or 13-year-old kid for something stupid with no bathroom. And these are things that we shouldn't do to our kids in America, anywhere, but let alone in this country.
It's hard to follow up with questions here, dude. Like, this is shocking.
Our
system
sad.
is broken.
It's very broken, and it's sad. But you know what? If we all, Charlie, now is my new brother, so he wouldn't let me wear the Super Bowl ring, but so I'm gonna work on it. So I'm let me wear it out here.
He has two.
Yeah, I know. Next show, we're both gonna have one.
Give back.
But
I tried to switch up for the chain, but he didn't want to go for that. So I'm still working on that negotiations right now.
But we all, like, the one thing we all need to do is focus on. We have a huge mental health crisis in this country. Cannabis can help with that.
Yeah.
We have, locking these kids up, man, the way we do. We just have to do something about it. And me and my team and my friends that are here and the ones that support my brand, we're all a part of that. So supporting my brand, the better my brand does, the more I do. So it's not about, I do like nice things. I'm not going to tell you I don't. I'm a car person. I like jewelry. I like certain things. But nothing is more satisfying than when we give back. And this year, every kid that was in the Macomb County Youth Home, we made sure that they got a pair of Air Force Ones at Christmas, just to make sure that they know that they're thought about. And the guy worked there, he told me, he says, I worked here 25 years. No one's ever asked about these kids at the holiday. They're still kids, bro. At the end of the day, that's someone's baby. When they were born, like, you look at them and we all make mistakes, but do we lock kids up at 12 years old and throw away the key? Like, you're still a child. Your prefrontal cortex is, I think, at 26 years old, the decision-making part of your brain, it's not even fully developed. And even an 18-year-old kid, like if you're 17, they'll give you a hearing. If you're 18, they give you mandatory life for a murder. I just don't think it's right, if you were born one day apart, that one kid gets to get a second chance and the other one doesn't. Doesn't make much sense from our lawmakers.
You mentioned mental health, and it's the discussion around cannabis and health, right? Like you were saying about the NFL, it has been had a lot, right? We do know that it's good for pain, it's good for recovery, it's a good opioid replacement. But we don't talk enough about mental health in America. How do you think?
Because there's a stigma attached to it. Like people say, if you admit that you're weak or people are embarrassed or whatever, and I got through prison from maintaining my mental health. I did 33 years, a lot of it locked down 23 hours a day. So if you focus more on your mind and your body, you have to take care of, your whole body, but your mind is, everything runs. That's the machine that runs your body. So, I did a lot of reading. I read a lot of things. I brought home one book. Well, I brought home 2 books from prison, a Bible, and a very dear friend of mine, he sent me a book. I was struggling at the end, and it was called Man's Search for Meaning, and it's by Viktor Frankl. And I read this book, and I was like, wow, I didn't go through shit compared to what he went through. And it gave me the strength to finish because I was struggling at the end. But now that book I give to people for gifts. So, and I've read it multiple times.
Pain, however, is hard to it's not relative, right? Like everyone experiences pain in different ways. And Charlie, how do you feel about like cannabis and mental health? What is your take on that? Both, from personal experience and like anything that you think more in general terms.
Yeah, it's interesting because here I am on the panel today. Just last week, I was in Pittsburgh on the panel with the U.S. Surgeon General, and he's talking about mental health and how that impacts everybody, especially coming out of the pandemic to where we are now and how social media plays into that. And he's really passionate about where we're going in that particular manner. So he's trying to go city to city to try to meet with organizations, the people who are in the communities that are difference makers, to try to go out there and destigmatize the mental health aspect. And that's a challenge for a lot of people because when you walk into a community, people, it's just that, I don't want to talk about that. Mm-hmm. And one of the things and one of the reasons why, he wanted to meet with me, we have our own foundation in Pittsburgh, which is called Best of the Batch Foundation. And we're an educational foundation, and we focus on STEAM education. And we say STEAM instead of STEM because we include the A for arts for the element for our young kids that we have in there. So we service 3,800 kids annually over 9 counties throughout southwestern Pennsylvania. And one of the things that he's trying to get and say, okay, how are now kids being more and more involved in this? And one of the things that we saw, that kids are actually getting kicked out of school because parents are using it. The smell gets embedded in their clothes, and then they get reported to the principal's office, and they're not telling on their parents, but yet they're suspended 30, 60, 180 days in some cases. And they have to now transition back into main school. I'm like, okay, that's based off what you may think about the plant. But where we are now and people are using this outside of opioids, we need to change that narrative. So it starts with education. So one of the things that we have in here, so we just coming out of the pandemic, we actually, our office is 5,300 square feet. We just opened up June of this year to 33,000 square feet. So this is now going to impact more kids. We now are anticipating to include close to 6,000 kids. I say all of that to say we now have a STEAM lab in our building to now create a pipeline for kids who want to now enter into this particular workforce. And they are very interested in this. And people talk about, well, why would you want to do that? Well, they may not be interested in chemistry in school, but if they're learning about the plant and learning about the blends and how the strands are created, now we can change that narrative. So we're now getting to that point, and the kids are like, wow, we are fully involved in this aspect. So now what we're looking to do is partner with companies who are in the industry to now sit back and say, show them what they're not seeing. This is not growing a plant in your backyard. There's a science to this. How can we now create a pipeline to the companies that are involved in the community, work through our foundation to now hopefully they have a career path. That's what we're doing in this particular manner. So it's exciting to be a part of it because I can tell my story about pain, but yet that may not resonate to these kids that are coming through. So we're just trying to do our small part, and we're doing our small part, but we need the help of everybody to continue to change the narrative around mental health and what this plant means for everybody.
Love that. Now, is this tied to CapStone in some form, or is this like a separate project of yours?
Well, this is both. CapStone is a partner within the expansion project. So yes, they are very fully involved in this particular project, but we've been doing this prior to me being involved in CapStone. It was just something that was created during my playing days because I lost my sister to senseless gang violence back in 1996. And I said if I was ever in position to give back, I would. My sister was only 17 years old. And at that point, I said, okay, I need to now try to create and do something positive in the community. Started the foundation January of 1999, and then here we are now 23 years later. Without that, that situation happening in my life, I don't know if we would be scaling to the numbers that we are now. But we have a lot of great partners. I don't do this by myself, and I would be fooling you if I told you that I did it by myself. It takes a collective effort, and we have a great team that supports our mission, vision, and what we're trying to accomplish at Best of the Batch Foundation. And for anybody who wants to learn more information about it, you can actually go to batchfoundation.org. And if you forget that, you can just put Charlie Batch Foundation, and it will populate you through the website, and you'll see the expansion project right on the splash page of what I just mentioned.
There's something that we all come from three of us come from very different places, very different backgrounds, three different colors, but we share something that is a love for Detroit. I'm from Argentina, and Detroit is my favorite American city. I could choose a phone number, and it's a 313. Represent, you know. And Benzinga is based in Detroit. And I just want to talk a little bit about cannabis culture in Detroit because it really impressed me. You know, the first time I came to Detroit, I loved it, you know, loved at first sight. But one of the things that really shocked me is that I got a newspaper, like a mainstream, regular newspaper, and 40% of the ads were for cannabis, and it wasn't even adult use legal at the time. Where do you think that comes from? Like, why is the cannabis culture in Detroit so strong?
You want me to start? Yeah. I think for me, like I said, a lot of us come from the streets. So we all love the city of Detroit. If you're from Detroit, you're very proud of Detroit. We all love Detroit. We all represent it in different ways. We have the D's, we have whatever, but I have friends, some that are sitting here, that without cannabis, the buildings would just be decayed. I could drive you down 8 Mile and show you a friend of mine has transformed blocks, and without cannabis, those buildings would be nothing. They would be rubble. So for us, we use cannabis as a transformation for Detroit. And of course, they're building up downtown. It's beautiful. They're doing a great job. But my friends, we reach outside the city. Kevin, who's sitting here, they had a store on the border of Grosse Pointe. It's now, you know, a beautiful store that he's transforming in a bad area into a beautiful building, and it's thriving. And you know, there's so many people that have done so much for the city through cannabis that you could tell a story about it, and yeah. I don't think you could even touch 10% of it. And it's without cannabis, man, it just wouldn't be possible.
And I think for me, you know, I'm born and raised in Pittsburgh, but my second home is Detroit. I was up there 9.5 years. If you're familiar with Eastern Michigan, it's about 30 minutes from downtown Detroit. So having an opportunity to kind of grow up there, a lot of my friends, Eastern's a commuter school, so a lot of my friends were from the city. They've smoked in college as well, and I never did it. And it's funny because now all the years later, they're like, you do it? Like, it's crazy because it's just kind of shifted the narrative, but I understand what that looked like. But again, it started with education, and those guys helped me with that. So now with my position within CapStone Holdings, yes, whatever I can do to help in that particular manner, I'm gonna do that. And one of the things, and one of the companies that we actually have under our portfolio company is a staffing company. Everybody talks about, you know, different ways that you can actually get in. Staffing company is called United Green. If you checked in, you saw the branding right underneath the banner there. That is our portfolio company, and they actually are set up in the actual exhibit. So if you have an opportunity, please stop by to see what they have going on, especially if you're looking to scale and you need help with the hiring practices. That is a great company to be a part of, and the CEO of that company is actually Craig Petersmark. So please stop down and say hello to him.
You know, I love that Rick just touched on cannabis revitalizing struggling parts of town, because that is my favorite narrative in cannabis. I was in Chile 2 weeks ago, making a case for legalization in front of Congress, and instead of sharing numbers, finances, I told these stories about struggling towns in the U.S. that were saved by cannabis, right? There's one in Northern California, Monterey County, right? And this guy would drive by it once and twice, 3 times, 4 times, and he would see a bunch of empty glass warehouses, greenhouses. One day he decides to stop and goes, what's up with these empty greenhouses? And they explain that the town is struggling. It has huge debts. It's in a financial fiscal deficit, about to go bankrupt because they had this huge business that was taken away from them. The story was that after World War II, America released a bunch of former war prisoners from Japan. And what they knew how to do was grow cut flowers. So they sent them to this place in California to grow cut flowers. And this region was thriving. In the 90s, cut flower production was moved to Colombia and Ecuador because it was much cheaper. So they were, left jobless, and thus the entire economy around it also crumbled. And then comes along cannabis with an investment, leverages the existing infrastructure that are the greenhouses, the qualified workforce that are these Japanese people who know how to take great care of plants that need a lot of attention. Within 6 months, the city was out of its deficit. Similar situation with Damian Marley when he bought that prison, right, the abandoned prison in Coalinga. The city had a $3 million debt. They came in with a $4 million investment, revitalized the town within 6 months, had created 200 jobs within a year, right? This is the potential of cannabis, right? How do we continue to leverage this to repair communities? What other aspects do you foresee it impacting in that way, right? Or what do you envision will be the future of cannabis for many of these struggling communities?
I've met business owners, restaurateurs that they say, thank you guys for coming in, that without cannabis being legalized, that their restaurant still wouldn't exist. So there's so many other aspects that cannabis touches, besides revitalizing these buildings and this. They keep the corner store going. They keep the gas station going. They keep, when you start to revitalize an area, other people take notice and they start to do it. So it's kind of a domino effect. And if we can keep that effect going and keep pumping that money back into these communities, I think it's going to do a lot of good for the communities that need it.
And you had a lot of outside counties that were doing some great things in the cannabis space, but because of Wayne County tied up in litigation, you saw a lot of these things, slow roll. But people were anticipating that. They were doing a revitalization of the buildings, and now they finally came on board, and you can see the growth, and everybody's excited about what's going on in Wayne County. But if you get a chance and you haven't been to Detroit, you have to come up and see the revitalization because it will be highlighted over the next year. Yes, we have the draft that's going on now, but next in 2024, the NFL draft is in Detroit, so that would be highlighted there. So prior to that, have an opportunity to stop up there, see what you have going on, and meet these guys from Benzinga. Their offices are right downtown Detroit, and they are sitting and they are putting their mouth right where they're literally speaking the truth because they are right in the middle of everything. So if you have not had a chance to go down there, please stop by, go down there, highlight, allow them to tell your story, man. And they are great partners. So this is why you are here. And these guys are genuine guys that they will help you succeed in whatever way possible.
Oh, shucks.
It's easy when it's the truth.
Thank you, Charlie. One of the things we or at least I, very often quote like ACLU stats, Black and Latino people are 4 times more likely to be incarcerated for simple possession of cannabis, even though consumption rates are similar. And we talk about this a lot, the racial bias and the war on drugs. However, it's not necessarily a racial bias. I'm coming to think now, it's maybe an economical bias. It's not targeted at racialized people only, but at marginalized communities in general, right? From a policy front, what do you think we can do in America to improve the situation, right? Of course, legalization would be ideal, but I think there are certainly many other things that we need to both improve the situation and repair many of these wrongs.
I think just continue to meet with your local politicians. And I think when you have a chance to come to conferences like this, there's a young lady that's here, and I don't know if floating around, Shafira Galouf. Literally, she is brilliant in that particular space, and I had a chance to meet her last year, and she talks about everything that needs to go on behind the scenes prior to laws being, accepted. And those are things that needs to continue to happen because yes, we can see what's going on at the federal level, but those side conversations need to happen and continuously happen. So I think that's a start in that particular manner, and every state is different. And of course, when you start looking at statistics and what's going on in California, Washington, Nevada, and you're bringing that back to your state, maybe you're onboarding, maybe you're not. Pennsylvania is a slow state to onboard, and we have a lot of support that way. The lieutenant governor has done his due diligence to try to get this particular law passed. They're still dragging their feet to have this particular issue passed. They're right there on the cusp, but yet it hasn't been approved yet. So I just think it's just a matter of continuing the conversation. Do not let it die down. If you receive negative information, continue to move the needle by forcing the leadership to continue to have these conversations and push it to the forefront.
I agree with Charlie. I think things are changing, but just at too slow of a rate. Like, what I got life for, you can get probation for now. So things are changing in the right direction. It's just not at the rate we would like. I think when we go to pass a law like the crack law in the 80s, they rushed it through. They didn't really think about it. They pushed it through. Now to change or repeal some of those laws, it's much slower and they claim much harder, but I get to talk to a lot of senators, a lot of judges, a lot of politicians now. Some of them are full of shit, but you know, there's a narrative there that they say they want to change these things and they say they want to correct them. So, but actions speak louder than words. So, you know, we do need to change them, but I feel at a much faster rate than they're being changed.
Totally. I got distracted. I'm just like too concentrated here. You know, we're staying on the policy front. I want to like double down on a question that I asked Tyson and Ric Flair yesterday, and it's humor me for a second here. Imagine you got to stand in front of Congress, full house, and make a case for legalization. Why do you think cannabis should be legal? You got like 1 minute. What would you say, Rick?
I would talk to him about the good that it does and the things that we're able to do through cannabis. You know, I don't think people realize, you know, people in cannabis are the most giving people. Everybody in this room here is involved in cannabis. And they're the most giving people that I've came across since I've been released from prison. So anybody that I've ever asked in cannabis, whether they're my friends or family or not, no one's ever told me, I don't want to give to this. I don't want to support this. They're always like, is it about making a change? Is it for a good cause? And it's like you said, it's a plant. It's not, you don't have to process it. You don't have to do anything to it. You know, recently I was on a pod somewhere and some idiot called in and said, well, opium's a plant. And, you know, heroin's derived from it. Coca's a plant. If you want to go through a process, you know, of putting chemicals and doing all these things, of course. But cannabis, it comes out of the ground. It's natural. It's proven that the good that it's done. If you look back even to Vietnam, I've read while I was in prison, that the good that it helped some of these guys coming home from Vietnam. And that was suppressed because they wanted to just pump pills down their throats. And every chance I get, I'm sure they don't like me, but I call the big farmers cartels operating within America. I mean, they're pill mills. They show, you know, they're killing our kids every day. Every day, man. I get a call from a friend or someone, we know someone's kid that's OD'd or someone that's died, or my partner here, a friend of his just came home from prison. There's no help in prison if you have a drug problem. The help is you might not get that drug in prison, but when you get out, your body's gonna crave it. And you know, my friend here, he did everything for his friend, and we lost him to opioids. You know, he buried him. You know, he tried to give him a business and he tried to help him and tried to change his life. But if we don't give them the help they need, there's no help. Like, you have to want to change, but you also have to have someone to I don't call it a handout, I call it a hand up. You know, and you have to give them that hand up. A lot of people don't want a handout. People say, oh, everybody wants a handout. Some people just want a hand up. I don't ever forget where I came from. A lot of people forget where they come from. I love where I'm from. I go back there as much as I can. I do everything that I can, and I'll always love the city. I love, you know, I don't love what it looks like, but I ride through there and I reminisce, and I drive by my grandma's house and I look at the vacant lot where I grew up or where my son grew up, and it means a lot to me. So if we can give some people a hand up, all of us, maybe somebody asks you for some help one day, give them a hand up. Don't give them a hand out. Don't look at it like that.
Charlie?
Nothing else needs to be said. We're closing on time, and that's the mic drop.
Fantastic.
Wow, what an incredible conversation. Keep the applause going.